I mean is I think the team selection is such a fascinating one. So I sit in, my role in talent. I've done this in a number of organizations. I help with succession planning and talent planning. And it's
Right.
really hard for leaders to have an open, honest conversation. Hey, Susie needs to work on these things. She's not ready to be, fill in the blank role, but she could be in 2 years. Really shy away from that. Go have a conversation about her for development.
Welcome back to Rise and Tell with Shikha. I am Shikha Singh, your host and author. I have got something special to share. My brand new book, Unburnable Ambition: How Overachievers Win Without Burning Out. This book is for all of us who dream big but refuse to let burnout be the price. Head to shikhasingh.com/unburnable ambition and sign up today. Now let's dive into today's episode. And today we have Carly Wolf with us. Carly is a strategist, connector, and a coach, and she's been helping people for over 20 plus years. She's been leading talent, culture, and transformation across global brands like Under Armour, Hyatt Hotels, Apollo Education Group, and she's also now training athletes, and she specializes in turning strategy into behavior that sticks. She has two powerful frameworks, and on this episode, we went into great detail about the three C's: that's clarity, confidence, and curiosity. So there you go, everybody. Today we have with us Carly Wolf. Welcome to the show, Carly. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm really good. I'm excited about our conversation today.
Same here, same here. Me too. Okay, we'll just dive right in, Carly. So tell me, you led the HR department for multiple corporations, and then you also got into the nonprofit sector. How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. In my roles, I've always been passionate about community and the impact of those things. Because when you talk about nonprofit, you're talking about impact to people's lives, you're talking about a cause, you're talking about a city or a place. And so in some ways it's just a natural part of what I do. Like I think about, as you said, my role in HR where I do culture and employee engagement and leadership development, all these things that cuts over to community leadership, right? You're shaping these worlds of impact. And so in this chapter of my life, community impact has twofold. One is volunteerism, and I do that with adaptive sports. And the other part of it is nonprofit board work. In the city, I live in the city of Baltimore. I work for serve on the city of Baltimore Workforce Development Board and also
Nice.
nonprofit for Scholas. So that's how I got started. I think just tapping into that root of connection and community and impact, and it's been really fun.
Wow, that's interesting. I want to know, Carly, what's the biggest challenge that you have faced in this journey going from corporate to nonprofit to getting into the sports field, being a coach for different teams? What was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Hmm. I would say for all of the things it's beginning, right? Like you and I are kind of meeting on a journey, a path. You're with me like an intersection on the path, right? So what we're talking about is everything that I've arrived here with, which
Right.
doesn't mean that the journey hasn't been a long one or a trying one. So I think the hardest thing that I've experienced is after saying yes, what do you do after that? And so with volleyball, I said yes, and largely like a friend was like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I was like, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but it sounds like you say you need help and that you'll help me. All right, let's do it." But now what do I do? I have to
Nice.
learn how to coach and and I want to be a good coach. And I want to just show up. Working in through my full-time career in HR. Yes, I want to do that. Okay, well, what does that mean? How do you continue to grow and develop your skills in the nonprofit space? Saying yes and then figuring it out. Like, how do you even get onto a nonprofit board? Like, that was a
Right.
barrier. So I
Right.
think it's first of all, saying yes is like sort of all right, let's do it, and then there's like, then what do we do? So I
Yeah.
think that part becomes difficult because you're starting in a lot of cases, like, or in those cases for me, like really from a blank piece of paper. And when you
Nice.
are starting from a blank piece of paper, you're like, well, where does the first line go? Where does like the circle go? Like, where do you go? But once you start kind of a little bit here, a little bit there, the picture starts to come to life. So I think the step after yes being always the difficult jumping off point. but also the most exciting because you're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to get out of this? Where can we go from here?
Exactly. And that's like so exciting, that stage that everybody gets to, because it's the same with writing a book too. You start with a blank page and then you're thinking, you know what you want to write, but then you're like, okay, what now? Where do I begin? Where do I end? What do I add? How am I going to write 20,000, 30,000 words? And then if you're writing fiction, then it's like, okay, how is this story mapping to everything? And then finally, I've seen some people, even though they put in effort, they will struggle midpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, you've written the book, but what now? How do you get it out in front of the world? What do you do next? So this is interesting, Carly. I love how you put it that way, and it's so easy to relate to. So while you started your path and you started walking on this path and this journey, what do you think you found when working with different people in different domains and different sectors? What is the one thing that you feel people lack the most when it comes to growth in their careers or in their field of expertise?
Yeah. I think curiosity as adults, like it's just hard to imagine
Yes.
like learning new things, being vulnerable, being uncomfortable, making time to stretch yourself, making time to build new skills, like fill in the blank. It's just really hard. And I also, you said something in there too, which is like, you get down the path and then there's kind of the middle, which becomes difficult. So where can you have curiosity in the middle? Like, why is this
Right.
difficult? What have I learned so far? What else can I achieve? Right? I think having that type of like mindset and questioning is
Right.
important. Or even, I'm sure you've experienced this. I'd like love to hear your thoughts. Like a lot of times I think about the journeys I've been on, whether it's career change that's come with a move or the topics we're talking about, like volleyball or any, like a lot of ventures, but there
Yep.
people are supportive and also they'll be quick to be like, I don't know, like, do you think you should do that? Like, or nah, I don't know,
Yes.
that's been done before. Fill in the blank, sort of, here's a reason why you may not be able to. I
Yes.
don't know, stay curious in that moment. Like, what can I, no, I like, yeah, I want to do this, but let me be curious about why that person said that and how can I take that and help shape and inform me and where I want to go. And I'll give an example of that. When I took the job, I was considering taking a job at Under Armour, which is out in Baltimore. That's why I live here.
Yes.
And so many people asked me if I had seen The Wire. And if you've not seen The Wire, it's a TV series, which is phenomenal. That was my first COVID binge. But I hadn't seen it at the time, but I knew it wasn't shedding a good light on the city. Although, again, phenomenal show. If I had let one person, or by the way, a series of people tell me about that to shift my move, I wouldn't have made it. But what I did in that is remain curious about, like, why was that
Right.
the dialogue? And honestly, it fueled then part of what I wanted to do when I came out here, which was to be a part of the conversation, be a part
Correct.
of the community, and be a part of something. And it is totally enriched my life in the 7.5 years that I've now been out here. So
Wow.
stay curious. Like I think curiosity like gets you so it fuels, it opens up, it moves. It's just such a powerful mindset.
Love it. Yes, and I completely agree. That has happened to me not once, but multiple times. Same thing like yours, Carly. I was living in a city that was an hour away from Toronto. And
Hmm.
then for some reason, we lived there for 3 years. We've been in Canada for 5 years now. We lived there for 3, 4 years actually. And for some reason, we weren't getting what we wanted out of that city. After living in Omaha for 6 years, we always wanted a place in Canada that felt a little bit like Omaha, where, it's quiet and small and clean and friendly people all over. Canada is amazing. But because of various reasons, it's just started to feel super crowded. And we decided casually, just out of nowhere, we're like, okay, you know what? Let's just search, and we got a dog. He obviously needed a big yard. He's a big
Yeah.
Doberman. And you're like, okay, you know what? Let's just see what's out there in the market. And then I think in like 2 weeks we closed on a house and we were ready to move. And that was an hour away again, up north from the city that we were originally in. And all our friends were like, what are you doing? There's not even a Walmart supercenter in that town. How are you going
No,
to
not the
survive?
Walmart Supercenter.
And I'm like, there are other grocery stores and, other things too. And it's fine if there are not 10 stores, but one or two of them. I think it's going to be okay. Everyone, no matter who we spoke with, same thing. For you, it was The Wire. For us, it was Letterkenny. Everybody asked us if we watched Letterkenny, and they're like, it's exactly going to be like that. I'm like, oh, okay. And I actually watched that show, but out here, it's so peaceful, and I get to do, what I like when I like without being judged by others. And the community people here have just made it so much easier for us to stay here and, just build our life out here. So I agree 100%. And it happened multiple times. So, like, another example would be with a book. Every time I had an idea for a book, so many people would come up and be like, why are you doing it? And then same thing with the move too. When we were moving from the US to Canada, all our friends were like, are you crazy? People move to the US for a certain reason. Why are you
Yeah.
moving away from the States? And yeah, so I agree. But I had my own reasons, and I love traveling. And so I was curious about a lot of different things. Same thing with writing, same thing with jobs and everything. So yeah, I agree 100%. I know, Carly, that curiosity is one of your three C's. So I would love for you to tell our audience what's your framework and what the three C's are.
Yeah, I think so. I love a framework because I think it could, I mean, it literally helps you kind of frame up a couple of like anchor points to work from. And I work with a lot of folks that are in career transitions and trying to figure things out. We mentioned the community work, my work in corporate. Like, there are so many examples of, I'll use the term pivots. Like, what do I want to do next, and where is that going to take me? And what I kept coming around to was the three words around curiosity, which is what, what we're talking about, clarity and confidence. And how do you kind of explore those things? It's not linear, right? You might have confidence and not clarity as an example, but how are you using those to kind of situationally apply where you're at, whether it's to assess, like, why am I being held back? All right, am I being curious enough? Is confidence in my way? Do I have clarity of where that's going? Or to kind of fuel where you're headed. Yes, I have clarity, right? And I can move forth with confidence, and there's a lot of power in that. And so those three words to me kind of really sit in a powerful ecosystem that can apply in work, it can apply in life, and I think are also really, just to go down the work path for a minute, like really important attributes that individuals can lean into, or even leaders as they think about coaching their teams, right?
Yeah.
You are, working on a project, or you're helping support their career development. How can you remain curious about what they need in their development
Yeah.
journey? How can you instill confidence, right? How can you provide clarity of, where they're headed and what they're doing? Like, and so I think it just applies in a lot of different spaces. And I hope that brings some options for folks just to kind of, again, either diagnose or to use as they move forward, and whatever kind of is next for them.
Love it. I love those three C's, Carly, because I feel like not just as a leader, but even when you're a team member at work or even in life as a friend, if you're anything, like whatever role you're playing, the minute you're taking on something new, the minute that you've decided, okay, fine, I think I'm ready or I'm going to try that. I think like all three C's come into play and they come into action right there. And I
Totally.
can somehow see this going both the ways.
Oh, for
Even with
sure.
our last point too, like when someone comes and tell you, why are you doing this? Are you sure you really want to move 3 hours away from Toronto downtown? I can either take it like maybe, they didn't mean it that way. They were just trying to be cautious. They're just trying to make sure that I knew what I was getting into. Or I can take that in a completely different way and then hinder my journey or my growth because someone close to me made it sound like they were not happy about my decision or
Yeah,
they didn't support my decision. And I
for
feel
sure.
it's yeah, and I feel it's the same with clarity and confidence too. When you are working on a certain project, because I feel like you're so invested in that subject and in that thing right then and there that oftentimes we fail to communicate it to the other person, even if it's to our family members or friends. And for some reason, I believe they're not able to see the clarity and confidence that we have on our project. And that also sometimes hinders it. So, my question, Carly,
Mm.
would be, have you been in a position like that? Or has in your coaching journey, have you ever found someone where they knew what to do, but they never got the support or the encouragement from their peers or their relatives or friends?
Yeah, I love that. And I think we could actually just workshop it on the call, which is that you're saying someone has at work a ton of clarity about where they want to go. And perhaps let's just assume they've got a lot of confidence about that. Well, how are they applying curiosity to the teams that they work with?
Mm,
Why do, if I'm leading a team, why do the people that report to me care about this? What
right,
could be good? What would help them? Why would this be a benefit? What do I need to support them to come along? Or stakeholders,
right.
similar questions. Why would they care about this? Why should they care about it?
Yeah.
Why will this matter to the business? Why will this matter to our customers? So I think I love that example because it's actually a really great coaching one, right? Because you're like, okay, you have a ton of clarity on what you're doing and you're very confident about it. How are you staying curious with the people that you're working with to bring them along? Because I think
Right.
that curiosity is felt, right? You're also expressing an opportunity for people to engage, right? You don't
Correct.
have to drive clarity and confidence like, as a bull in the china shop, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like delicately exploring with others to bring them on to help pitch in, facilitate, champion that very clear and confident vision that you have.
Nice. Nice. Interesting. And yeah, I did not see it from that perspective, but now when you
Tell me
explain
what
it
you're
that way,
seeing.
yeah. No, when you explain it that way, it makes sense. Yeah, obviously. Like, I think now I understand because I see myself in that shoe and I'm like, okay, I love this topic and I love podcasting, or I'm so intrigued to know other people's stories and I want to convey it. Someone in my household or someone who I work with might not know why, like what is the reason, why do I want them to understand what I am feeling and how strongly I'm feeling about a certain thing. So now
Mm.
that makes perfect sense.
I think they can both make sense because I think you're kind of what I'm hearing you say exploring that is almost bringing people along in the clarity of what you're doing.
Right.
And so while you feel it, maybe you just like feel it in your heart and you're like, this is what I love to do. If you want to appease and support someone else's curiosity, maybe it's worth exploring that, right? All
Right.
right,
Yes.
I want to do podcasting because not only do I love it, but here's why I love it, right? Maybe dig a layer back. So I love that we're kind of kicking it around a little bit because I think it also shows the flexibility and nuance of what we're talking about here. And where, in your case, you're like, here's a lens that I'm applying. I'm like, that's amazing. Here's a lens I'm applying, right? It sits in so many scenarios.
Love
So
it. Love
thank you
it.
for sharing that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into networking, Carly. I know you have over 20 years of experience. You've moved around a lot. So, how do you think, especially, again, I'll just give you an example and then you can go by it. Let's say there's someone who's just recently moved to the country, or let's say they've moved cross country, East Coast to West Coast or West Coast to East Coast, completely different culture, completely different background. And let's say someone's been working in the corporate industry for way too long, but now they moved because they got an amazing offer to work for a startup company where the work culture is completely different. And then people often say, oh, start networking, start building relationships, start building connections, and maybe you'll feel at ease. Maybe you'll start to blend in a little bit. So, in your experience, what's been the most crucial part of networking for you personally and for anybody who, like the example that I just put in, do you think networking actually helps this person or is going to help this person feel better with the huge change that comes with moving cross country?
For sure. So one, I want to acknowledge the difficulty of a move. It can be really tough and it can be really exciting. Both of those things can exist in a
Yeah.
move. And I think everyone sits on a different spectrum of what that looks like. Personally, I experienced both, although I think people would be like, "Oh no, you've been moving, you seem fine." But really, in my soul, I'm always nervous about it. Did I cry when I moved to Baltimore? For sure. Like, like what am I doing here? I don't know anyone. So I think networking is super important. And maybe it's, networking can sometimes catch a bad rap. I think networking can also feel scary for people. But if we just even opened it up around connecting, like if we use the word connecting, and maybe that's a reframe of, especially in a move or a new community, and that could be literally where you live, or to your point about a work culture. And how are you connecting with folks? What are those things that are important to you that you can draw on and pull in with the people that you meet? So maybe at work, maybe at work that could be something as basic as a skill set. Hey, we
Right.
went to the same school. We love the same types of work tools. I don't know. I have a friend that used to work at this company, and that's really like a shared interest that we start riffing on. In your life, it could be things like, I really love trivia. Where can I start to go do that? And so, since we're talking about networking, I think those then start to become, the question might be like, how do those become like those human interactions, right? How do you talk to people? How do you pull out from them, like where you're coming from? And one thing I want to say is, I think whether it's networking or this relationship and connection that we're talking about, they're like little deposits and exchanges over time. It's
Right.
building the relationships. And so I would offer to have people give themselves grace. Very rarely do we actually find that best friend at like the first trivia night or the first like work happy hour. Sometimes that happens, but sometimes it takes right time and experience and those deposits. But back to the networking question, I think it's really, maybe we use our word curiosity, curious about the other person. And I think it is really about, and I'm just double downing on this, the frame of maybe the shared why are we here. And I'll give an example. I work at Hyatt hotels, so I'm in hospitality, and travel is really big. So guess what we get to talk about? Travel. Where was your favorite vacation? What's your favorite hotel? Automatically, in that case, we're talking about work culture. It gives us something to connect on, and then you can
Right.
build from there. And so, what's your common connection, and what do you want to build on? Hold space for this as a moment, and I can build on that, and give yourself grace in the journey.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Those were some very actionable tips that anybody can implement or take, Carly, if they are in that position and they struggle with networking. I love it.
And there's
I,
to add, you talk about practical tips. I think there's like a ton of easy things too. At work we have, depending on the size company, you might have interest groups, right? Like lunch pals that you might be able to pull up with,
yep,
or in personal life you have apps like a meetup, social media, like TikTok group. There's a ton of stuff out there. It's
correct.
about what are your interests and how do you start to pull on those to form those connections.
Agreed, 100%. I'm curious to know, Carly, since you've been, in the HR industry for so long and then you've been a coach for so long, what's the one thing that when someone's trying to get to the next level in their career, but they're just doing it for the money, or they're just doing it for the title, or they're just doing it for the sake of just because, if they lack purpose, what would your suggestion be to people like that who are still trying to grow? They want to get to the next level, but they just don't have a purpose or a certain goal or something that comes from within to do that, or to be someone better in the career, or leadership, or whatever industry they're in.
Love this question because I maybe in the HR world have like a non-traditional view on this, which is I love that people are going after like title and moving in career and not at face value. So hold with me for a second.
Right,
What
right.
I think is interesting about a title is that in work we have created constructs, right? You do have a
Yes.
ladder and a place to go. So I do think that it helps give you insight into where you can go, right? Like what is my goal and what does that look like, which can fuel criteria to think about. The caveat being your question, which is what is my purpose? I think just the outcome of a title or just the outcome of pay,
Mm,
you lose sight of, I'm going to use the word impact to
right,
ultimately get you there. So your purpose could still be, I want to make a lot of money for the company. I want
right,
to be able to sell products that matter to my customers. And that in itself, I want to be able to sell products that matter to my customers is a purpose. And it
right.
starts to root you in an experience around, well, then how do I understand what my customer needs?
Mm,
How can I support them in the best delivery of what they need? Because by the way, if I'm doing that, what am I doing? I'm selling, I'm
right.
making money, and that leads to this criteria of which gives me an opportunity to get promoted. So I'll use that because I think that's just like baseline, maybe an easy one up and down. But I think you can
Yeah.
cut that over to any role. Your
Yes.
purpose should ultimately drive the impact that you're trying to make, which layers into ultimately the outcome that you're wanting, which is mobility within your career. So I think by
Nice.
starting with just the title, you're just losing the opportunity to build the impact that allows you to actually show up at the door for that promotion.
Nice.
Right? Like whoever does an like a year-end check-in or evaluation and you're like, all right, well, I've just been like talking about the title all year. Like, do I get the title now? And they're like, well, what
Yeah.
have you been doing for us? And what have you been doing for us is purpose. And I think
Yep.
so that I think and purpose can be a lot of things, right? We can be in nonprofits and have purpose, we can be in sales and have purpose, but
Yep.
ultimately what are we delivering against?
Nice. Nice. I love it. The minute you started your sentence and you said, it's not going to be traditional and not like what people say in the HR world, I was like, wow, this is getting interesting. So thank you.
Well, I think we go. Like, I think it's like the question's fun because I think it's trying to flip it and finding purpose. And sometimes I meet with people and they're like, I don't have like a mission in life. Like, I want to go and get a paycheck and be able to move
Yeah.
up and retire. And I'm like, that's great. But how do you facilitate that in the best way? And so that's why it's non-traditional because I think moving in careers or looking for a title gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's there for a reason. It gives us, visibility into where we can go and how to get there.
Love it. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation with you, Carly. This is so exciting because you are literally getting a totally different perspective, especially when it comes to all the coaching and self help and self growth questions that I'm asking you. So, this is fun. This has been
Yeah,
fun.
I love the
Okay.
dialogue.
Yeah. I want to ask you about how has it been working and coaching athletes?
Mm.
How is it different from the leadership world, from the nonprofit world, from everything that you've done in the past?
I think the biggest difference, especially today, I work on the high performance side of volleyball. So the athletes are kind of making their way to the national team, which ultimately could be like a full time career for somebody. The biggest difference is the pace to performance. So the amount of feedback people give, the focus and concentration that happens in practice, the long tail planning around delivery of performance, selection. I'm going to use corporate terms, but like selection of talent, right? Who makes the team? All of those things just happen in such a more intentional, fast paced, and clear outcome delivered way. And that last part, what I mean is, I think the team selection is such a fascinating one. So I sit in, my role in talent. I've done this in a number of organizations. I help with succession planning and talent planning. And it's really hard for leaders to have an open, honest conversation. Hey, Susie needs to work on these things. She's not ready to be, fill in the blank role, but she could be in 2 years, right? We really shy away from that.
Yeah.
But by shying away, we don't give Susie what she wants because we don't have to, go have a conversation about her for development.
Right.
But on the elite side of sports, they're like, I can send 12 people to the world championship and I need the best 12 people. And part of your service may or may not be to go to this, but we still need you in the gym to train, to be a part of something bigger. And maybe your opportunity will come, but also maybe it won't. And that's okay because you're still in this space that's in service to, in this case, your country. And that's just one example, but I think it's across the board around the experience in the gym versus our offices.
Nice, nice. And that's such a wonderful point and a wonderful thought, Carly. So I want to like piggyback on that and I want to go back to that statement of yours and ask you about it. So you mentioned this situation where someone needs feedback in the corporate industry or when you in the professional world. And leaders usually a good leader knows how to give feedback but also support that person to grow in a way that their feedback helps them and not like brings them down. So what do you think leaders should do when they're faced with certain situations like this at workplace where they definitely have to give feedback to their team member and it's not going to be a good one, and obviously it's not going to be one where they're giving them a promotion, but how can they handle that situation well as a good leader should? What are some do's and what are some don'ts that leaders can follow?
Two things out of the gate: normalize feedback and flip the difficult conversation into a conversation that both enables that individual and the team. So what I mean by that is when I think on the athlete side, there's two things that are very interesting. One is that you do long range development planning, right? Where are we going in the next couple of years as a team? What are the skill sets that we need to work against the competitors that we have? And that's like long range, and both also as an individual. How do we get a Josie right to the next step? And then it's something that happens in the gym every single day. And so when I talk about normalizing feedback at work, it's those two parts. What is someone's career goal and where they're headed a year from now, 2 years from now, and how do you have that conversation so it's intentional? And then how do you normalize the day-to-day stuff? And I think this is where we miss the mark a lot, both in the work, but also in the conversation about meaningful feedback. So that's a broad brush, but you asked about difficult conversations. So similar to, I mentioned like building the roster for the team.
Team, yeah.
What's interesting there is they're not, pulling the athlete that shouldn't go because they're like, "Ooh, we feel bad like that, you've been here for a while and you've been trying." No, we're like, "Here, this is the best team that we need." And also this is kind of the culture that we have in the group. I guess my other question for folks is how do you kind of flip the idea of difficult feedback into purposeful feedback that's helpful for one, the individual, because they may not know what they need until you address it with them,
Yeah.
but two, the team, right? You want the strong roster. If you have someone that's not pulling their weight, everyone suffers for that, right? Whether it's your time, whether it's your reputation, whether it's literally hitting a deadline.
Yep.
And so I think difficult feedback could be what's feedback in service to the team and to this individual. So that might be another way to think about it. And it might change. What I've seen that do is change the dynamic into really thinking about the outcome of what could come from the feedback being addressed.
Nice.
By the way, I know that it's also not easy because, again, we haven't normalized the regular feedback. And so maybe the other thing to take away is how do you metaphorically bring a gym to your team?
Yeah.
What does regular feedback look like? How do you set that gym culture? How does everyone participate? How do you have that longer term goal married with sort of the more immediate needs? Might be another way to kind of think about it. Just big picture.
Yes. Wow. Love it. I love it. They're seriously, I know when I read your profile it said no fluff, just, points that make sense. And this conversation was exactly that, Carly. So I'm so glad that you agreed to be a guest on our show. Thank you so much for your time, Carly. Before we end the show, I want to ask you, is there anything that you would want to share with our audience?
The one theme I'm hearing from today is finding different ways through, right? Whether it's seeking that clarity, building your confidence, staying curious. But I think that is all in service to whatever your goal is. And so if you and I could be that echoing voice for folks that are listening right now, which is keep going. That's what I would leave with. And I've just really, really appreciated the conversation. I was also very excited about today. So thanks for the good questions.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carly. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of Rise and Tell with Sheekha. My book, Unburnable Ambition, is all about how to chase your biggest goals without losing yourself to burnout. You can now sign up at shekhasingh.com/unburnable ambition. Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself, and keep your ambition unburnable. Thank you.